Crystal Theobald. Crystal Theobald, born in 1982 in California, was a 24-year-old mother of two daughters living in the Arlanza neighborhood of Riverside, California. She had won $38,000 on a slot machine and used the winnings to open a heating company with her estranged husband. At the time of her death, she was in a relationship with 20-year-old Juan Patlin. Her mother was Belinda Lane. On the evening of February 24, 2006, Crystal was riding in a two-door Honda driven by Patlin, with her brother Justin also in the car. Her mother drove a separate vehicle just ahead. They were heading to a local store near the 6600 block of Geranium Place, Riverside. It was supposed to be a quick errand. Nothing out of the ordinary. Earlier that day, members of the Vario 5150 gang had been shot at by a rival group called MD-17. Crystal's brother Robbie had been driving a similar white SUV in the neighborhood, and the 5,150 members in a white Ford Expedition pursued him, mistaking him for a rival. Robbie managed to escape, but the gang members continued circling the area, looking for anyone to retaliate against. They were hunting for a white SUV, and Crystal's car happened to be in the wrong place. When Crystal's car stopped at an intersection, the expedition pulled alongside. Julio Heredia, 18, exited the vehicle and opened fire with a semi-automatic weapon. Crystal was shot in the back of the head. Patlin took her round to the midsection, but survived after surgery. Crystal was rushed to Riverside Community Hospital, where she died 2 days later on February 26, 2006. The vehicle's occupants included driver William Sotelo, 17, and passengers William Lemus and Manuel Lemus. A young mother heading to a store with her family, and she is gone because someone confused one white SUV for another. The investigation stalled. The mistaken identity scenario, twin white SUVs, and Belinda Lane's initial reluctance to cooperate fully made progress nearly impossible. Detectives had pieces, but nothing that held together. So Lane and her teenage niece Jamie McIntyre decided to do something about it themselves. They were not going to sit around waiting for leads that were not coming. They launched one of the earliest known social media sting operations in criminal history. Jamie created a fake MySpace profile for a girl named Rebecca, using an anonymous woman's photos and carefully selected slang to appeal to gang members. They befriended as many 5150 members as possible, working their way into conversations, learning names, learning habits. Then Lane suggested a second profile, Angel, using Crystal's own photographs to attract more attention. Think about that. A mother using photos of her dead daughter as bait to catch the people who took her life. The Angel profile drew the interest of William Sotelo, who became infatuated and mentioned during flirty exchanges that he could pick Angel up in his white Ford Expedition, matching the crime scene vehicle description exactly. Lane shared this connection with Riverside PD, Detective Rick Wheeler. Under interrogation, Sotelo admitted to driving the SUV and identified Heredia as the gunman. But before police could act further, Lane could not contain herself. She had been pretending to be her dead daughter for weeks, talking to the man who drove the car that night. The rage overwhelmed her. She confronted Sotelo directly through MySpace, sending a series of messages that culminated in, "Then why did you kill me?" Sotelo immediately went dark and fled to Mexico, where he lived as a chili farmer in a rural village with a wife and 4 children for a decade. He thought he was safe. He thought nobody would find him across the border. 10 years later, in 2016, Lane received a tip on Facebook about Sotolo's whereabouts in Mexico. Someone recognized him. Even in a small farming village, thousands of miles from Riverside, the internet found him. Lane forwarded the tip to police. On May 6, 2016, Mexican State Police arrested Sotolo. He was extradited the following day. Julio Heredia was convicted in 2011 of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. Sotolo pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced on January 23, 2020, to 22 years in prison, the last of 8 defendants convicted. The Netflix documentary Why Did You Kill Me?, directed by Frederick Monk, was released in April 2021. Belinda Lane has been sober since the day Crystal was killed and now runs a Facebook page called Unsolved Murders in Riverside. But the next case was cracked not by a grieving mother, but by a factory worker with no training who stumbled onto a classified ad that changed everything. Barbara Ann Hackman Taylor. On May 17, 1968, well digger Wilbur Riddle was scavenging for glass telephone insulators along U.S. Route 25, a few miles north of Georgetown in Scott County, Kentucky. He found a decomposing body wrapped in heavy green canvas tarpaulin resembling tent material, earning the victim the name Tent Girl. Scott County Sheriff Bobby Vance investigated, but police could not identify the woman. Initial estimates placed her between 16 and 19 years old. The cause of death was asphyxiation combined with severe beating trauma. With no leads, she was buried in 1971 in Georgetown Cemetery at county expense, with a donated headstone bearing a police sketch. For nearly 30 years, nobody knew who she was. The tent girl was actually Barbara Ann Hackman Taylor, born September 12, 1943, in East St. Louis, Illinois, making her actually 24 years old at death. Not the teenager police estimated. They had her age wrong by almost a decade, which meant every search was looking for the wrong person from the start. She had married George Earl Taylor, a carnival worker who traveled from town to town, and had an 8-month-old daughter. She was last living in Lexington, Kentucky, approximately 15 miles from where her body was found. Just 15 miles. She disappeared around December 6, 1967. Her husband never filed a missing person report, not once. Instead, he told her family she had left him for another man. And her family believed him. For 30 years, they believed him. Todd Matthews, born May 3, 1970, in Livingston, Tennessee, was a factory worker at an auto parts plant with no forensic training whatsoever. He had no law enforcement background, no degree, just a relentless need to know. On Halloween 1987, his girlfriend Lori Riddle, the daughter of the man who found the body, told the tent girl's story during a ghost story exchange. Matthews became consumed by the case, spending years researching after factory shifts. He would come home from work, sit at his computer, and search. Night after night, year after year. In November 1997, after a decade of obsession, Matthews created TentGirl.com to publicize the case. It was one of the earliest websites ever dedicated to an unidentified person. In January 1998, he discovered an online classified ad posted by Rosemary Westbrook of Arkansas, searching for her missing sister, whose description, the timing, the geography, the age, matched Tent Girl precisely. A classified ad on the internet, posted by a woman in a completely different state. That is what cracked a 30-year-old case. Matthews emailed the information to Westbrook, who immediately contacted the Scott County Sheriff's Office. Police confirmed key details, including a distinctive gap between her top two center teeth that matched family photographs. The body was exhumed for mitochondrial DNA testing, conducted by Kentucky's state forensic anthropologist, Dr. Emily Craig, and compared to saliva samples from Taylor's sisters. On April 23, 1998, the identification was officially announced, with DNA confirmation on April 26th. A funeral attended by approximately 100 people was held on April 25th, and the remains were reinterred in the same grave. After 30 years as a nameless woman buried at county expense, Barbara Ann Hackman Taylor finally had her name back. Matthews is widely credited as the first person to solve an unidentified remains case using online tools. He co-founded the Doe Network and Project EDAN, later becoming Quality Assurance and Communications Director at NamUs. His work helped inspire Billy's Law, passed federally in December 2022, making NamUs mandatory for every state. Matthews died unexpectedly on January 3, 2024. George Earl Taylor, the prime suspect, died of cancer in October 1987 and was never charged. The family deliberately excluded Taylor's married name from her new headstone. But what if the answer was not hiding in an online classified ad, but sitting in plain sight on a satellite image for over a decade? William Moult. William Earl Moult, born March 26, 1957, was a 40-year-old mortgage broker living in Lantana, Florida with his girlfriend. Described as quiet, reliable, and polite, he was not a frequent drinker. On the evening of November 7, 1997, he went to a nightclub in Lantana. At approximately 9:30 p.m., he called his girlfriend to say he would be home soon. He had consumed several drinks. Around 11 p.m., witnesses saw him leave alone, getting into his white 1994 Saturn SL. He appeared to be in fine condition. He never arrived home. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office investigated immediately. His car was not found at any body shop. No wrecks were reported anywhere in the county. No evidence of foul play surfaced. No credit card activity, no phone calls, no significant leads emerged at all. It was as if he and his car had simply ceased to exist. And here is what made this case particularly frustrating. The area where Moult's car ended up, the Grand Isles neighborhood in Wellington, approximately 20 miles from the bar, was still under construction in November 1997. No houses had been built yet. No businesses, no lighting, no security cameras, no witnesses. The retention pond existed, but surrounding homes would not be built for another year. He drove into a dark, empty construction zone in the middle of the night, and there was simply nobody around to see it happen. Nobody heard the splash. Nobody noticed a car was missing from the road. 22 years passed. His case went cold. His name faded from the files. In August 2019, a former resident of the Grand Isles neighborhood was casually browsing Google Earth to look at his old neighborhood. Just killing time. While zooming in, he noticed what appeared to be a car submerged in a retention pond near Moon Bay Circle. He contacted a current resident, Barry Fay, who lived adjacent to the pond. Fay could not see anything from ground level, so he deployed a personal drone over the water, confirming a vehicle beneath the surface. The car had been visible on Google Earth satellite imagery since 2007, but no one had noticed for 12 years. 12 years it sat there in the open, visible to anyone who happened to zoom in on the right spot. On August 28, 2019, deputies extracted the heavily calcified white 1994 Saturn SL from the pond. The car was covered in algae and mineral deposits, barely recognizable as a vehicle anymore. Skeletal remains were found inside. On September 10, 2019, the remains were positively identified as William Earl Molt through dental records. Authorities presume he lost control of his vehicle while driving home, entering the dark, unlighted construction zone and driving straight into the pond. There were no guardrails, no streetlights, nothing to stop him. No foul play was suspected. The case was listed as resolved. His girlfriend finally had an answer after 22 years of wondering. A man vanished for 22 years, and the answer was sitting on a screen the entire time, waiting for someone to look. But the next case was not solved by a satellite image or a classified ad. It was solved by a brand new technology that would go on to change everything about how cold cases are investigated. Marsha Lenore King. The fourth case on our list is Marsha Lenore King, known as the Buckskin Girl. On April 24, 1981, 3 young men discovered a body along Greenlee Road in Newton Township, Troy, Miami County, Ohio, approximately 5 miles from Interstate 75. The victim lay in a fetal position, fully clothed but barefoot, with clean bare feet indicating she was placed there rather than having walked to the location. She wore a distinctive handmade fringed deerskin poncho with purple satin lining, earning her the name Buckskin Girl. The autopsy revealed death by strangulation with extensive blunt force trauma to the head and neck. She had not been harmed in any other way. A composite drawing published on April 28th generated approximately 200 leads. All investigated, none fruitful. Her fingerprints matched nothing in any database. Officers assigned to investigate served as pallbearers at her funeral, burying her as Jane Doe at Riverside Cemetery in Troy, who makes a handmade buckskin poncho with purple satin lining. Someone had to know this woman. Someone had to recognize that poncho. And yet for 37 years, nobody came forward. The Buckskin Girl was Marsha Lenore King, born June 9, 1959, in Arkansas. Her parents divorced during infancy, her mother remarried, and Marsha was adopted by her stepfather. She grew up in the Little Rock area. Known as a habitual hitchhiker, she left her family home in 1980 and was never heard from again. She was never reported as a missing person because she was an adult and her family believed she was simply traveling, living her life somewhere on the road. Her mother remained at the same address and kept the same phone number for 37 years, hoping Marsha would call. 37 years with the same phone number, waiting for a call that was never going to come. The case saw decades of forensic advances, each one promising and each one failing. A.D. NA profile generated in 2001. Entry into NamUs in 2008. Mitochondrial DNA submitted to CODIS in 2009. Updated facial reconstructions by NCMEC in 2016. Forensic palynology and isotope analysis, placing her travels through Texas, Oklahoma, and the southwestern United States. Every new technique was applied to this case. None of it produced a name. She remained the Buckskin Girl, a woman in a handmade poncho that someone had clearly loved enough to sew by hand. The breakthrough came in 2017 when forensic anthropologist Dr. Elizabeth Murray contacted the DNA Doe Project, a nonprofit applying genetic genealogy to identify unknown persons. This was a new approach. one that had never been tried on an unidentified decedent case before. The DDP extracted DNA from a blood sample that had been preserved since 1981, processed it, and uploaded it to GEDmatch, a public genetic genealogy database. Through painstaking genealogical research, they matched Marcia's DNA to a first cousin. From there, they built a family tree that led them back to her. On April 9th, 2018, the Miami Valley Regional Crime Laboratory confirmed the identification. The public announcement came April 10th and 11th, 2018. This was one of the first unidentified decedent cases solved via genetic genealogy, predating the famous Golden State Killer identification by approximately 2 weeks. A technology that barely existed a year earlier had just given a name back to a woman who had been anonymous for 37 years. Marcia's biological father, John Wesley Sossaman, had died January 5, 2018, just 3 months before she was identified. 3 months. He never knew what happened to his daughter. On July 20th, 2018, a memorial service in Troy replaced her Jane Doe headstone with one reading, Marcia L. Sossaman King. Over 50 local residents attended, people who had never known her, but who had lived with her case in their community for decades. The investigation into who took her life remains open and unsolved. Whoever left her on that roadside in a handmade poncho has never been found. If you have made it this far and enjoy content like this, consider subscribing to the channel. We cover cases just like these every single week. And trust me, the remaining cases are just as unbelievable. But the next case was solved not by DNA or satellite images, but by 3 freckles on a dead woman's face that matched a childhood photograph. Paulette Jaster. Paulette Susan Jaster, born February 4th, 1954 in Davison, Michigan, was a high school basketball star, honor student, and homecoming queen candidate who attended Central Michigan University, but dropped out after 1 semester. She was subsequently diagnosed with schizophrenia, and her condition worsened over time. After a fight with her father, Edwin, in December 1978, she left Michigan for Florida. She returned home briefly in April 1979 for her mother's birthday, then left 2 days later. On approximately May 5th, 1979, 25-year-old Paulette was last seen carrying an Army-style duffel bag, walking toward Interstate 69 near Davison. Social Security records later revealed she earned $319 working at a restaurant inside a Walgreens in Mesa, Arizona, in January 1980. A 1983 tip had placed her in Florida, but nothing was confirmed. By the 2000s, both parents had died, and the family estate remained partly unsettled because Paulette's status was unresolved. Nobody could prove whether she was alive or dead. Around 2013, Paulette's siblings began searching missing person websites, including the forum websleuths.com. They had been looking for their sister for over 30 years by this point. They needed to settle the family estate. But more than that, they needed to know. On Web Sleuths, they connected with Debbie Saunders, a trained volunteer searcher who went by the handle Houston Mom. Saunders was not law enforcement. She was not a forensic expert. She was a woman in Texas who spent her free time doing something most people would find impossible to sustain. She cross-matched missing persons reports with Jane Doe records across the country, case by case, detail by detail, looking for connections that professional investigators had missed. She was working through the Harris County Unidentified persons list when she found Nama's case UP4641, a Jane Doe killed in a hit-and-run in Harris County, Texas, in March 1980. The woman had been traveling between Arizona and Florida carrying a duffel bag. The timing, the route, the description, it all lined up perfectly. Dr. Sharon M. Derrick, a forensic anthropologist with the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office, investigated the potential match. There were no fingerprints on file, no DNA, no dental x-rays. Every conventional method of identification was off the table. It seemed impossible. Then Dr. Derrick did something nobody had tried before. She scanned the 1980 autopsy photos at high resolution and noticed distinctive freckles on the victim's cheek. Tiny marks that most people would overlook. She asked Paulette's sister Peg Spurlish for childhood photographs. She compared them side by side, freckle by freckle. 3 freckles matched perfectly, 2 on the left cheek and 1 near the right eye. The position, the spacing, the pattern. This rare freckle pattern identification, one of the only times this method has ever been used to confirm an identity, was announced on January 29, 2014. On March 28, 1980, Paulette had been at a truck stop off Interstate 10 in Houston, seeking a ride to Beaumont, Texas. She was alone, carrying everything she owned in that duffel bag. A trucker picked her up, but dropped her along the interstate minutes later for unknown reasons, keeping her duffel bag. He just pushed her out and drove off with her belongings. Walking along the highway with nothing, she was struck and killed by an intoxicated hit-and-run driver. She had no identification on her, nothing to tell anyone who she was. The driver was charged, pleaded guilty to failing to stop, and received 5 years probation in July 1980. 5 years probation for leaving a woman dead on the side of a highway. Paulette was buried in an unmarked grave, known only as Jane Doe, for 34 years. In October 2014, her family held a memorial service at her Houston grave, joined by Dr. Derrick and Debbie Saunders, the volunteer from Web Sleuths who refused to stop looking. 3 freckles. That is all it took, but someone had to be looking closely enough to notice them. But the next case was cracked not by a forensic expert, but by thousands of strangers on Reddit who refused to let a dead man stay nameless. Jason Patrick Callahan. The 6th case on our list is Jason Patrick Callahan, known as the Grateful Doe. On June 26, 1995, at approximately 1:30 p.m., a Volkswagen Vanagon, driven by University of South Carolina student Michael E. Hager, 21, crashed into a pair of trees on U.S. Route 58 West in Emporia, Virginia. Both Hager and his passenger were killed instantly. Neither wore seatbelts. No drugs or alcohol were found. Authorities suspected Hager fell asleep at the wheel. They had likely been driving through the night after the concert. Hager was immediately identified, but his passenger carried no identification whatsoever. No wallet, no license, nothing with a name on it. Found with the unidentified passenger were 2 scalped Grateful Dead tickets for shows at FK Memorial Stadium in Washington, D.C. on June 24th and 25th, 1995. A red tie-dyed Grateful Dead t-shirt and a handwritten note reading, "Jason, sorry we had to go. See you around. Call me," followed by a phone number with no area code and signed by Carolyn T. and Caroline O. The ticket reseller in Pennsylvania could not recall the buyer. Due to severe facial injuries from the crash, mortuary photographs were not released publicly. Without a photo to distribute, identification became nearly impossible. At least 221 missing persons were compared and ruled out over the next 2 decades. 20 years and nobody could put a name to this young man who died with Grateful Dead tickets in his pocket. In late 2014, Australian Redditor Layla Betts co-founded the subreddit r/Grateful Doe after encountering an updated 2012 MEC facial reconstruction. The community grew quickly. Thousands of people joined, all focused on one question. Who was this man? They compared the composites to missing persons databases. They tracked down ticket resellers. They analyzed the handwriting on the note. In Layton, December 2014, Betts posted a compilation of composite sketches and evidence on Imgur. The post went viral. Millions of people across the world saw the face of a dead man who had been anonymous for 20 years. A man known as Steve, a former roommate of the victim in Illinois, recognized the composites as his old roommate Jason, a Grateful Dead fan who had not been heard from since 1995. Steve stared at the images and knew immediately. He provided photographs bearing a strong resemblance to the reconstructions. By January 10, 2015, the information reached the family. Jason's mother, Margaretta Evans, saw the post and responded on the Grateful Doe Facebook page. She wrote that the man in the sketches was her son, Jason Callahan, from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and that she had been looking for him all this time with no luck. 20 years she had been searching. 20 years of not knowing whether her son was alive or dead. Jason Patrick Callahan, born April 18, 1976, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, had left home around June 1, 1995, to follow the Grateful Dead tour. He was 19 years old. His mother had never filed a missing person report because she did not know which jurisdiction to contact, and she assumed her nomadic son was simply living somewhere else, following the music. On December 9, 2015, the Virginia Medical Examiner's Office confirmed via DNA that the body was Jason Patrick Callahan. His half-sister Shannon described seeing the sketches and said she honestly started shaking, that when she looked at that picture, it looked like her father was looking back at her. But the next case was not solved by Reddit or a viral post. It was solved by a biological mother who used Facebook, Google Maps, and a billboard to hunt down the man who had taken her daughter's life. Andrea Bowman. Andrea Michelle Bowman was born Alexis Miranda Badger on June 23, 1974, in New Orleans, Louisiana. Her biological mother, Kathy Turkanian, then 16, was pressured to place her for adoption at 9 months. The baby was adopted by Dennis and Brenda Bowman of Hamilton, Michigan, and renamed Andrea. Friends witnessed Dennis being physically rough with her. In late 1988, Andrea told school staff she was afraid to go home and accused Dennis of misconduct toward her. A social worker returned her to the family. The Bowmans denied the allegations. Shortly after, they relocated to a mobile home in rural Allegan County. On March 11, 1989, Dennis reported Andrea missing, claiming she had stolen money and run away. Think about that. A girl tells her school she is afraid to go home, and weeks later her adoptive father reports her as a runaway and a thief. Police classified her as an endangered runaway and issued a warrant for her arrest for larceny, listing Dennis as the victim. The girl was treated as the criminal. No foul play was suspected. Nobody questioned Dennis's story. Her photograph appeared in the Soul Asylum Runaway Train music video in 1993, alongside other missing persons. Millions of people saw her face on MTV and had no idea she was buried in the backyard of the man who reported her missing. Around 2010, Kathy Turkanian was contacted by an adoption agency requesting her DNA for comparison with a Wisconsin Jane Doe. This was the first time she learned Andrea had been missing for 21 years. When the Wisconsin match was ruled out, Turkanian launched an aggressive online campaign. She created a Facebook page called Find Andrea M. Bowman that generated an outpouring of responses from people who knew Andrea and shared stories of what they had witnessed. She connected online with Carl Koppelman, an accountant and amateur forensic artist active on web sleuths, who became what she called a game changer. Together with online sleuth Sue Kovacs, Turkanian uncovered Dennis Bowman's criminal record through public records requests and began publicly accusing him on Facebook. Turkanian rented a billboard near the Bowman's home offering an $11,000 reward. She was not going to let this go. She used Google Maps and a drone to study the Bowman's backyard from above, convinced an unusual cement structure concealed Andrea's remains. She looked at that cement pad on the satellite images, and she knew. She told anyone who would listen that her daughter was buried under it. The critical forensic breakthrough came through a parallel investigation that nobody expected. Dennis Bowman had a horrifying criminal history that nobody in Michigan knew about. In 1980, while on bail for a separate offense, he harmed and strangled 25-year-old Kathleen O'Brien Doyle in Norfolk, Virginia. A case that went cold for decades. Nobody connected the dots. He moved to Michigan, adopted a daughter, and killed her too. In 2018, Norfolk cold case detective John Smith used genetic genealogy through Parabon nanolabs on DNA from the Doyle crime scene. The technology that did not exist in 1980 finally caught up with him. Dennis Bowman appeared on the resulting suspect list. At a 2019 National Cold Case Seminar, Norfolk detectives were presenting their findings when Michigan investigators in the audience recognized Bowman's name. Two investigations in two different states suddenly merged into one. Investigators obtained Bowman's DNA from a cup at a police station. It matched. Bowman was arrested November 22, 2019. During a recorded jail visit with wife Brenda in December 2019, he confessed to taking Andrea's life. He told his wife what he had done, not knowing the conversation was being recorded. In a February 2020 phone call, he revealed she was buried in their backyard. On February 4th through 6th, 2020, investigators dug at the Bowman property and found skeletal remains in a shallow grave covered by cement. The same cement structure Turkanian had spotted on Google Maps. The same one she had photographed with a drone. The same one she had been telling investigators about for years. DNA confirmed the remains were Andrea. The biological mother who had never been allowed to raise her daughter was the one who found her. Bowman pleaded guilty in the Doyle case and received 2 life sentences plus 20 years. On February 7th, 2022, he was sentenced to 35 to 50 years for Andrea's case. He is now 75 and incarcerated at River North Correctional Center in Virginia. The Netflix documentary Into the Fire. The Lost Daughter was released September 12, 2024. But the final case on our list involves an amateur forensic artist who drew the same face over 20 times, and then one day saw that exact face staring back at him from a database. Tammy Jo Alexander. On the morning of November 10th, 1979, a farmer in Caledonia, New York, 23 miles southwest of Rochester, discovered the body of a teenage girl in his cornfield near the Genesee River off U.S. Route 20. She had been shot twice with a .38 caliber handgun, once in the head over the right eye, while standing at the road's edge, indicating complete surprise that she never saw it coming. Then, she was dragged into the cornfield and shot again. Her pockets were turned inside out, suggesting identification had been deliberately removed. Whoever did this did not want her identified. Heavy rain that night washed away most forensic evidence. She wore a red men's windbreaker labeled Auto Sports Products, Inc. and carried a silver necklace with turquoise stones. She also had a keychain locket inscribed with the words, "He who holds the key can open my heart," sold at vending machines along the New York State Thruway. A waitress at a diner in Lima, New York, recalled her eating with an unidentified adult man the night she died. That man has never been found. Over 10,000 leads were investigated over the decades without result. Serial killers Henry Lee Lucas and Christopher Wilder were considered and eliminated. She was buried as unidentified girl at Greenmount Cemetery in Dansville, New York. No name, no family at the funeral, just officers who worked her case serving as pallbearers. Tammy Jo Alexander was born November 2, 1963, in Atlanta, Georgia, and grew up in Brooksville, Florida. She attended Hernando High School and worked as a waitress at a truck stop. She had a history of running away and had hitchhiked as far as California with truckers. She was gone 1 week after her 16th birthday. In 2009, CPA and amateur forensic artist Carl Koppelman of El Segundo, California, discovered websleuths.com and began creating realistic portraits from coroner photos. Starting in 2010, he sketched Caledonia Jane Doe more than 20 times, posting his reconstructions to Namus. He spent hours combing through old Florida, Arizona, and California high school yearbooks, searching for the face he knew better than almost anyone. He had drawn her so many times he could see her with his eyes closed. Meanwhile, Tammy's childhood friend, Laurel Nowell, began searching for her on social media in the early 2010s, connecting with Tammy's half-sister, Pamela Dyson. No one had heard from Tammy since the late 1970s. In August 2014, Dyson and Nowell filed a missing person report, the first one ever filed for Tammy, and her information was entered into the FBI NCIC database in Namus. In September 2014, Koppelman, browsing Namus as he did almost every day, came across the new listing with a high school photo of Tammy Jo Alexander. He stopped scrolling. He knew that face. He had drawn it over 20 times. He instantly recognized the face he had been studying for 4 years. The eyes, the cheekbones, the shape of her jaw. It was her. He posted on Web Sleuths with the word bingo, followed by, "I think this is Callie," using the nickname they had given Caledonia Jane Doe. He alerted multiple law enforcement agencies immediately. Police obtained DNA from Dyson, and in January 2015, the Monroe County Medical Examiner confirmed a mitochondrial DNA match. On January 26, 2015, the identification was publicly announced. 35 years, 2 months, and 14 days after she was found in that cornfield. Retired Sheriff John York, who had kept the case active for decades and never gave up on it, thanked Web Sleuths directly, saying he was so indebted to them he could not even express it. A law enforcement veteran, crediting an online forum full of volunteers for solving a case that had haunted his department for 35 years. A new headstone ceremony was held June 10, 2015, attended by approximately 100 people. On Tammy's 57th birthday in November 2020, police released 3 audio clips of her voice from 1979 cassette recordings. For the first time in over 40 years, people could hear the voice of the girl they had been trying to identify. The person who took her life remains unidentified. The FBI maintains a $20,000 reward, and the investigation continues under Livingston County Investigator James Merrick. Tammy Jo Alexander has her name. Now, she needs justice. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.